It's been a minute since I produced the last Heart of the Hutch, but we're coming back strong with a great guest. David Patton is the Senior Director of Content Strategy for Fred Hutch, where he leads a team that reports cancer information and scientific discoveries across multiple venues. David has spent the last 15 years applying the skills he learned while working at the Wall Street Journal newsroom to help organizations adapt their marketing and communications to the shifting landscape of digital publishing. David Patton, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
So, for a big piece of both of our careers, the center of gravity for the way information was gathered, edited, and distributed was New York City, for better or worse, where big media companies owned the people, the process, and the infrastructure. However, about 15 years ago, that center of gravity began to shift to Silicon Valley, where now a handful of big tech and social media companies have disrupted everything. So what are your thoughts about the audience's perceptions and expectations within that changed information landscape?
I've never been a hard news person. Like, I worked in the newspaper business, in the news, online news, but I've always been very much a curious person about how do we learn about the world through, information or stories or whatever. And so I'm more interested in figuring out how do you reach people with great stories than conveying news, right? Which is still a business now, was a business then, is a business now, but has obviously been massively disrupted by early on Twitter, Facebook, now Instagram, certainly Google through search. And it kind of goes on and on and on. And so how people consume information has changed dramatically in those 15 years. And it's been a challenge for anybody, whether it's a news business or an entertainment business or a cancer care and research center, to connect with their audiences. And for me, it's been kind of more like a fun challenge, a puzzle on how do you shift your strategy and your people and how you're telling those stories. And we're about to probably start a new one right now.
Tell me about your role at Fred Hutch and how that was shaped and maybe informed by some of the traditional journalism methods and practices.
My traditional media, right, was in a newspaper business, but I had a pretty non-traditional role. I was in the digital newsroom basically from the get-go. And so the reason I'm here is because I'm good at helping organizations operationalize their storytelling. And that has been much more important now that a brand, an organization can go directly to their audience. They don't work through the media anymore. And so that's where I come to here. My role is Senior Director for Content Strategy, and that is encompassing our storytelling content. And now, increasingly now that we have patients here at Fred Hutch, how do we change our patient information, mostly on the website, but in other places, to give the patients and potential patients the information they need to come here and manage their care. But then going back to that research piece, how do we give people excitement and hope? How do we recruit people by showing what kind of a wonderful place it is to work here? I always say when I came here, when I was recruited, I looked at the website and the photos, and they're your photos. And it really tells a story of what kind of place this is. So how do you extend that across all different channels, right? So that it comes across to anybody we're trying to get engaged with us in some way or another.
Yeah. So you mentioned audience. Who is our audience? And the reason that keeps me awake at night is it is so much about what we choose to do, how we choose to do it. So, David, who is our audience?
Our primary audience right now is potential patients and I would say existing patients. Then there's their caregivers, there's friends, their family. We're trying to get to those people first because we are the only NCI designated care center in this region. We have additional audiences, obviously. Because we're a science organization, people who are interested in health and science, that's sort of a narrower niche of what you would call sort of the general public. You've got potential recruits, potential donors, existing donors. It kind of runs down into smaller referring providers, basically doctors who are oncologists or other kinds of doctors in the region. From a storytelling standpoint, right, the magic is how do you create things that are going to be resonant to all your audiences? And then when are you going to be very specific about this is really only for potential patients or existing patients, or for that matter, doctors who are looking for information around the services that we offer.
A good story is a good story.
And the mechanisms that you tell it, right? This is, I think, one of the opportunities / challenges, right? The science community has a very formulaic way that they, provide information,
right.
But there's like 1 million bioscience papers that come out every year. And so connecting about your science to that audience, you're going to do your paper, but how do you also pull out the cool stuff of that paper and reach people on a different level than I got to read another work paper, right? I want to kind of level up. So it's always been fun here for the 6 years I've been here, because there's just no end to the cool things that are happening, particularly around the research.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that I was attracted to this gig, right?
So let's really get into it now. You're describing a pretty complicated news and information landscape. How are you guiding your team to adapt to that?
One of the reasons I came here, and one of the great thing is you had already created Fred Hutch News. Done in journalism style, right? Sort of, we're asking those questions, we're drawing out the stories, we're doing the kind of investigative journalism that you see. Hadn't really figured out the distribution. Initially it was a magazine, printed as well as the website.
Yeah.
The magazine kind of went away. It was just the website. We do a much better newsletter to about 200,000 people every month. I think now what I'm starting to think about it, and we've always had really great social, how do we leverage the journalism style storytelling, the investigative work, and get it onto all the channels that people are going to interact with us? So when I was still in the Wall Street Journal's newsroom and Twitter came along, I was like, Twitter, this is fantastic. Because Twitter was all about a feed.
Yeah.
It was free. I had tons of content on the Wall Street Journal. One of my roles was how do we build our audience, right? And we had an additional challenge at Wall Street Journal because it was paid. No one was paying for news 15 years ago. Now it's a little bit more common. I was like, wait, Twitter, I can just put a headline and a link, post it on Twitter for free, and people will sign up for my feed. Fantastic, right? That is awesome. But the purpose of that Twitter link, and then later Facebook, to a lesser extent, was to drive people back to our website, right?
Yeah.
And we even had a strategy where we would make certain articles free, post them on Twitter, because we were really just doing audience growth.
Right.
Now the challenge is you can't expect people to click through, right? One, most of the social media companies don't even want you to click through. They want to keep you focused on that platform. So our challenge is, the way I'm guiding folks, and I've come up with a terrible name for it, dynamic storytelling evolution, which you can laugh a little bit, but that's what it is how
Sounds
do we...
dicey to me.
It is very dicey. That's capital D, small y, big S, big E. How do we tell our stories with the assumption that people aren't going to move across channels? So we can tell the same story on TikTok, then tell it again on Instagram, tell it again on our website, tell it maybe in a newsletter, tell an audio story, all kind of doing it roughly at the same time, and then slicing it up to match what the channel needs and then to match that audience, without the expectation that people are going to say, oh, I saw it on Twitter or X now and went back to the website to read it.
Yeah.
So it's about being efficient in our storytelling mechanism, but also not trying to expect people to go back and forth, because increasingly they're just not, right? Even within social media, some people are only TikTok people, some people are only Instagram people. And so in that world, it's a challenge, because obviously we still want to get people to the places, the platforms that we own, like our website, but it's also an opportunity in that we're not going to assume that just because you saw it on the website, you won't see it on Instagram or vice versa, right? It's like, okay, we'll just tell that story again in a different format.
So I know what we're doing is not journalism, but it feels journalism adjacent. And when I get down into the things I do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, it feels a lot like my first newspaper job, right? The way I'm looking for stories, research stories, the way I conduct interviews, the equipment I use. Like, the only thing I'm not doing is shooting Friday night ball games, right?
Yes.
For the paper. But it feels the same. So here's my question. If I was a 23 or 4-year-old
early career
person and wanted to get into this business, what skills should I acquire? I
have children who are in the college era, and I've talked to a lot of young people, and they're like, I'm thinking about going into journalism. And initially I was like, why would you do that? It's not exactly a growing industry.
Right.
But what I've realized is, actually, it's a great thing to start your career in, because one, don't expect that you're going to have a long career in it, but it gets you out of your comfort zone. You have to have uncomfortable conversations with people. You have to do a lot of research. You're on a constant deadline, so you're used to managing your time better. Is a great way, and you and I both came up in this, like it's a great way to learn really hard skills that then are applicable in all kinds of different ways, right? So you don't have to stick with it, but it's a great way to get started. And there's a lot of low-paying, really interesting jobs, even still, in every city and many towns across the US. And now you're seeing it, right? It's translating into the paid model with folks who have figured out how to make money on YouTube, on TikTok, where they're getting paid through the platform or on Substack or whatever. A lot of what they're doing is journalism. And you're seeing a lot of journalists who are leaving the media companies and starting their own channels on Substack, on YouTube, and making money because people are also more willing to pay for the interaction, right? I'll sign up for a $5 a month for a newsletter from a person that's going to give me something that's of value to me.
That idea of trust and this kind of concept of brand, people had loyalty to the New York Times or the Seattle Times or a local TV station. It feels like that idea of loyalty to a brand is also shifting. And
in terms of journalism brands and sort of media brands, I think the loyalty was never necessarily there, but it was like the only option in town. And now there's so many other options to get that information. There's another trend in terms of people are much more distrustful of organizations in general, government organizations, political organizations. There's just not a lot of trust there. This harkens back to the 70s in which there were some questionable activities, and it sort of has eroded that trust all the way through. Now, I think a lot of the loyalty goes people-based, right? I follow this person on TikTok. I see their face telling me stories. I have a relationship with this person who I've never met, never will meet, but I subscribe to his channel, right? And watch him when he posts every day. There's where your kind of loyalty, I think, ends up.
So that branding loyalty has shifted from institutions to individuals.
I think so. And we talk about a lot is how do we draw out our own people, right? Yep. Many of the scientists are, they're focused on talking to other scientists. And so how do you, draw out their stories to talk to broader audiences and make it approachable? I think that's one of the things we're trying to do because there are hundreds of scientists here doing incredible things, hundreds of clinicians like taking care of people. They're having one-on-one relationships with their patients and they're having relationships with other scientists. Scaling that, doing it through these new channels is the opportunity, I think, because each one of those folks, they're here, right? They represent the brand. Yep. If you have the loyalty to a scientist or clinician who's here, you kind of get some loyalty to the larger brand and you feel better about them, right?
Sort of a halo effect.
Yeah. I mean, I think brand is one of those things that people talk about, like, what does it mean? And I had a fantastic colleague at one of my earlier roles, and he's like, brand is a feeling, right?
Yeah.
If you're really good at building your brand, you kind of can close your eyes and sort of invoke the feelings of that brand without really thinking about it in like, oh, it's because of your photography or that scientist. It's more like the interactions I've had over time with that thing have made me feel something about that brand.
A cumulative effect.
Yeah. Cumulative effect, right? This is our challenge.
Yeah.
People are now inundated with tons of content every day.
Too much, it seems like.
It's too much there's too much choice. And so how do you create that consistency so that you get that brand feeling across all these different channels? Yeah. Like it's a big challenge for us and certainly for any organization now.
All right, last question.
All right.
So if someone was interested in following what you and your team are doing, how would they do that?
There's easy ways, right? You can go on any social media channel. We're on all of them. Blue Sky, TikTok. Just search Fred Hutch. You'll find our channels. Go to fredhutch.org and sign up for our newsletter. It's at the bottom of the homepage, and you can get a fantastic monthly roundup of everything that we're doing. Hopefully, we're making this as easy as possible for people to find our stories, whatever the platform that they like. You'll see more of that from us, I think, over the course of the year as people like you and some of our incredible writers like Diane and John and Sabrina and Bonnie do more of these dynamic storytelling evolution examples where, we're sitting down with people and interviewing them on video and audio and also writing up a little text story on there and then making it appear on all of the different channels.
That's a great place to end. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Thanks, Robert.